Good day. This is the second last session on working capital and current asset management, and this session will focus on credit monitoring, how we monitor the credit and outstanding balances and report on those. And so in the previous session we dealt with the credit terms and the credit policy. So what are the requirements, what are the agreements with the customer? In this one, we will focus on the credit monitoring, how well those policies are implemented, and to understand when there are deviations or movement away from the credit policies. And then the last session will deal with some comments on cash management. So the average accounts receivable collection period is the number of days, the average number of days between the credit sales, when that happens, and the collection of the cash date. So looking at an average, and obviously from a cash conversion cycle perspective, that number needs to be as short as possible. The average accounts receiving collection period can be calculated into two formula or two ways. First one is the average AR divided by the average sales per day, or alternatively the average AR divided by sales multiplied by 365 gives us the average collection period for the accounts receivable. This needs to be monitored on a regular basis. It needs to be managed properly, understood properly, and any trends that might occur or that might start showing needs to be identified, and they need to be responded on. And hopefully that would be positive trends, not negative trends, but very often it is a negative trend where the accounts balances are growing, or the accounts receivable days, average days, are increasing, and then action needs to be taken. Accounts receiving aging, that is an analysis to understand what the outstanding balances, how long they are outstanding, and they can be grouped into either current or overdue categories, and they need to be managed in those two categories as well. So the current ones, they're not problems yet, but as in previous session already indicated, that they need to be managed in a proactive way so that they do not end up in overdue categories. So good communication, clear statements, accurate invoices, those type of actions should be supporting the current accounts receivable accounts. And then the overdue accounts and those categories, they need to be analyzed and understood, and they normally put into or classified into certain, we call it buckets, in a 1 to 2 month bucket, a 3 to 6 month bucket, a 6 to 12 month bucket, and then a 12 month plus bucket. And the reality is, when outstanding balances go beyond 120 days, which is basically sitting in the second bucket, that 3 to 6 months bucket, it becomes a problem. To collect outstanding balances that are 3 or 4 months old becomes a real problem, statistically proven to that effect. And once they are 6 to 12 months behind, then customers very rarely, or the money are very rarely collected, and those should be in the legal process by that time already. What are the benefits of factoring? Improved cash flow, saved internal cost in terms of running your own collections department in the company. There's improved focus from management in terms of the core business, and they don't need to focus on all these collections, back-end collections, but they can focus on doing new sales, new transactions, and growing the company. And there's also a reduced investment in accounts receivable. Disadvantages is already said, the cost of factoring, the premium that they're taking, plus the strain on the relationship with the customers. These things make this transaction a very, very expensive transaction. There's also a negative perception often around companies who do sell their debtors, because it looks like the company is in trouble and as a last resort taking this expensive option. And we also already said that the factors are much more aggressive in their collection strategies, losing the customer relations, and we very often not see the customer coming back. Another element is credit insurance. That is to try and protect the outstanding monies, and especially the bigger accounts are then insured by an insurance company who takes on the risk. So if the customer does not pay, surely there are very specific terms to these agreements, but if there is a default, then the insurance company will step in and often pay a substantial portion of the outstanding balance. The difficulty in agreements like this is, if you're transferring your full risk of not being able to collect the outstanding balances, what incentive is there for the company to actually collect their amounts? All they can do is they can just wait the time out, not collecting anything and collecting from the insurance. So there's a fine balance between what works and what doesn't work, and the insurance company's requirements and their contracts with the company which are being insured. It creates an administrative burden, because you now need to manage these insurance payments, insurance claims, and these things as well. And to make this concept work, you actually need a significant risk pool. In other words, a lot of outstanding balances, so that they can average themselves out, they can cross-subsidize in terms of the premiums, and ultimately makes this a worthwhile exercise. Collecting from international customers has added difficulties in terms of the risk of delays, time delays, damage, theft, because of the duration of products being transferred. It takes much longer, and there are many more participants in the chain. Variable credit standards and terms needs to be set up for various markets. Foreign exchange risks comes into play, and there are often a lot of difficulties in collecting from foreign customers, because often the legal status of those contracts and those transactions is in the foreign country, and therefore a correspondent, in terms of attorney correspondent, needs to be appointed, which incurs a fair amount of additional costs. Then the last comment is on the Consumer Protection Act. This is not in detail discussion on that, but what is the purpose of the Consumer Protection Act? It is to ensure that there are fair transactions taking place, that credit is accessible to the customers on a fair basis, that there is a sustainable marketplace for goods and services being sold through credit because of the healthy credit system that's in place, and a number of protections of the rights of customers, of which privacy, information privacy of the transaction details, the ability to choose in terms of the credit terms, disclosure of information, and a number of other elements are being protected through the Consumer Protection Act in South Africa. That brings us to the end of the second last session, and the last session will then deal with the cash management and how cash should be invested and managed in the short-term period.